heard it.
Okay, it is now on. That's not gonna work. Okay, so it starts with me. I am plaintiff's attorney, Mr. Murray, M-U-R-R-A-Y.
I am the witness.
I am the court. I'm the defense attorney, Mr. Rockhill.
Okay, starts with me. Ready? Now, how close were you to this group of 3 people at Strawberry Max? How close is the closest you got to them?
About the distance I am from you now, what's that? About 10, 20 feet? I'm not sure.
The record will reflect the distance from the witness chair to the corner of the jury box is 18 feet.
Did you have a clear view of Mr. Anthony and Mr. McIntosh?
Yes, I did.
Was Mr. Quartermain also with you?
Yes, Mr. Quartermain was with me.
Right next to you?
Yes, right next to me.
Would you describe Mr. Quartermain's appearance, first of all, his height, approximate height?
Between 6'2" and 6'4", 6'5".
His weight?
His weight, in the time I knew him, varied maybe between 210 and 260 pounds. He had a long scruffy beard, and there were times he didn't have a beard, and he had very fierce looking eyes.
Did he have a full beard in the spring of 1984?
I don't recall. It varied in that period of time.
Would it be fair to say that he was a fairly distinctive looking individual?
Oh yes, very distinctive looking.
Hard to miss, correct?
That's correct. You would not miss him.
Were Mr. Anthony and Mr. McIntosh facing in your direction at any time during this encounter at Strawberry Max in Mill Valley?
Yes, they were.
At any time did they acknowledge your presence?
No, they didn't.
They didn't say hello?
No, sir, they didn't.
Mr. Young, sometime after, at some point, did you learn that Ronald Ewing had been killed?
Yes, sometime after.
Do you recall how long after his death you became aware of that?
No, I don't recall.
At some point after his death, or after you became aware of his death, did Mr. Quartermain ask you for a ride to a McDonald's restaurant?
Yes, he did.
Did he tell you why he wanted you to take him there?
Yes, he did tell me why he wanted me to take him there.
What did he tell you?
He was meeting Ron McIntosh to receive another payment for the killing.
Now, in addition to the fact that he didn't like to drive, did he give you any information why he wanted you, in particular, to accompany him that time?
Yes, he did.
What did he tell you?
He thought that there was a chance that Ron McIntosh might try to kill him.
And why did he want you along?
Just that if there was somebody else there, it might deter Ron McIntosh from trying to kill him.
Now, on that occasion, did you actually ride with him? Do you recall?
I don't know what you mean. Did I ride with him?
Did you both go in the same car?
Yes, we did.
Would you describe where you went on that occasion?
Yes, we drove to the McDonald's in Mill Valley, which is on the opposite side of the freeway from where FITC's offices were, and we went into the back part of the parking lot of the McDonald's, and after we were there for about a minute or two, or what seemed to be a short period of time, Ron McIntosh drove up in an automobile, and Drax went over and spoke to him and then signaled me. He got into the car there and signaled me to follow him.
And did you do that?
Yes, I did.
Sometime after that, did Mr. Quartermain have a conversation with you regarding how to collect a particular debt?
Yes, sir.
Could you describe that conversation, please?
He told me that he still hadn't been paid in full for the piece of work he did for the Gold guys, and he was having great difficulties even trying to reach them.
Were you aware of the piece of work that he was referring to?
Yes, I surely was.
And what was that?
The killing of Ron Ewing.
Did you suggest to him how he might be paid for that money owed?
Yes, I did.
What did you suggest to him?
I said that I had read that the company was in receivership and what he should do was hire an attorney and demand payment for services, send them a bill. I think at that point he told me he was due $11,000. I said, well, get an attorney and send them a letter saying, I want my money, and sue. I said, if they don't respond, sue the receiver or the company and you'll probably win in court, because I said the gold guys aren't going to come on the witness stand and deny that you ever performed services for them. All right, well, so we can't have our mics on. Can you guys hear the clicker?
When I had the mic on, I heard a noise. Did you guys hear a noise?
Mm-hmm.
Who does Mr. Quartermain remind you of?
General Hospital.
Oh, we must be old. No one else said anything.
I just wanted to win.
It has one like the dashes.
So there's a click.
I don't remember what he looks like, but I remember the name.
It's not everyone, because there's a click in the middle. You can hear it?
No Anna out there?
I'm texting her.
Should we turn on our, yeah, this?
I have
they
mine
can't
on.
hear it.
Okay. Can't hear it?
Can't hear the clicker?
Yeah. Maybe they weren't listening for it.
All right. Well, we finally get to talk. We're going to come up on Devereaux Capital Corporation. Did you turn that on? I hear the switch.
Oh, you can hear it? Can you guys hear swishing noises?
Yeah, I
Oh,
can.
sorry. Okay, go ahead.
All right, 150 now on line 3.
Okay, now at some later time, did you receive communication from an attorney?
Yes, I did.
Did that include a payment?
The communication I received was a check that I had that I was supposed to endorse.
Was that 1 or 2 checks?
2 checks, I believe.
And they were payable to whom?
I signed the checks on the back, Devereaux Capital Corporation, with my name. I'm not sure if the name of the attorney was endorsed or had to be endorsed on the check.
And those were the checks that were payable eventually to Drax Quartermain, is that correct?
I don't know.
Your Honor, counsel is leading this witness again.
That question is sustained.
Have you later seen those checks that you endorsed?
Yes, I have.
Was there another endorsement on the check?
I don't recall if there was or not.
Let me ask you this while we're doing this. At the trial of Drax Quartermain, were you asked to identify the originals of the checks that you saw?
Yes, I was.
And at this point, you don't have a present memory of whether or not Mr. Quartermain's name was on those checks
Mr. Quartermain's name?
as an endorsement.
I don't believe his name was on there. The endorsement I was discussing was whether it was Devereaux Capital and the name of the attorney that the checks were made out to, or just Devereaux Capital.
Okay, at the jury trial, were you asked to look at the back of the check where the endorsements occurred?
Yes, I was.
Objection, Your Honor. That's irrelevant. Whether he has asked at the trial.
I'm trying to refresh his recollection, Your Honor.
Does that refresh your recollection?
Not really. I'd really have to see the checks.
All right, sustained.
Well, Your Honor, at this time I have no further questions, but I would ask for leave to reopen when we can locate the checks, if we can locate the checks.
Relative to the subject matter of the checks only?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, I wonder if this would be an appropriate time to take a short recess before the cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, we'll be in recess for about 10 minutes. All right, Mr. Young, do you want to retake the stand? You are reminded you're still under oath.
Could I have one moment to get my investigating officer?
Yes, certainly. All right, I believe we had concluded with the direct examination of Mr. Young, and we're about to begin the cross-examination.
I think I straightened out the problem with the checks. If I could ask a few more questions on that?
You may reopen.
Mr. Young, you mentioned before the break that you had advised Mr. Quartermain that one way to get the payment from Anthony and McIntosh was to sue them using the name Devereaux Capital Corporation.
Yes, that's right.
Now, at some point, did Drax Quartermain ask you to assist him in obtaining the payment of that lawsuit?
Yes, he did.
What did he ask you to do?
He called and told me that he had received payment, or his attorney had received $11,000, and that the funds were in the form of a check and they were made out to Devereaux Capital Corporation. And I told Drax, well, then he could just sign and endorse the check over to his attorney. And Drax told me that his attorney wanted me as an officer to endorse the checks.
Did you do that?
Yes, I did.
Did Mr. Quartermain tell you to whom, how you were to get these checks?
I told him how I wanted to get them.
And what was that conversation?
I named a restaurant in North Beach where I was having lunch that day or the day after, and I said, I'll be there between 12 and 2. Just have somebody come over and bring the checks and I'll sign them.
And did someone arrive?
Yes, sir, someone did.
Who was that?
All I know is that it was a young female.
Were you advised what the name of the lawyer was that was sending over this person?
Drax had mentioned the name of the attorney, yes.
Who was the name of the attorney that he mentioned?
The attorney's name was Flynn.
And you signed the checks and gave them to the messenger, and that was the end of that transaction?
Yes, that was the end of it.
All right, nothing further.
Cross-examination.
Mr. Young, my name is Gordon Rockhill. I represent Michael Anthony. I don't believe we've spoken before, have we?
No, I don't believe we have.
Young is not your real name, is it?
We'll stop there. That's 5 minutes again. What's that?
She hasn't responded.
All right, well, so is Angela. Oh, you probably want to take the test. Yeah. She's supposed to be here.
You having a hard time there?
Try not to be noisy. You have to tell everybody. All right, up to 160. Let's go back to your question on line 6, pretty please. 160.
Mr. Young, my name is Gordon Rockhill. I represent Michael Anthony. I don't believe we've spoken before, have we?
No, I don't believe we have.
Young is not your real name, is it?
It is now.
When was it made your real name?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to anything going into a name change. I think it involves some threat to the witness.
I have no intention of disclosing the witness's prior name, which I know. I just want the court to be aware that this witness has had more than one name.
You want to stipulate to something regarding a federal program or something?
Yes, Your Honor.
And you wish to stipulate that Young is not the original name of this witness? He has had some other name, and he's been given the name Young in connection with some federal proceedings.
Well, I'm not sure of that, Your Honor. I want to establish that.
Okay, I'll allow you to inquire without an in-camera hearing as long as a prior identity is not divulged.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Does that satisfy the people's concern?
Could I have a moment with Mr. Young?
Yes, go right ahead.
That's fine, Your Honor.
All right, Go ahead.
Mr. Young, when did you start using the name Young?
I started using the name Young in 1981.
And was that a name that you chose?
I believe that I did, yes, sir.
Aside from that name Young and the name that you were born with, have you used any other names?
Yes, I have.
Could you give me those names, please?
I don't recall.
How long did you use such other names?
I don't recall.
When did you use such other names?
I don't recall.
Where did you use such other names?
I don't recall.
How many other names have you used?
I don't recall.
Now, you've told this court that the first meeting you had with Mr. Anthony was at this restaurant, right?
Objection. Ambiguous. It could refer to several restaurants.
2 of them have been named, I think, here.
The first meeting was at the restaurant, right?
Are you referring to the chance encounter at Neptune Palace?
When did you have or where was your first meeting with Mr. Anthony?
What do you mean by meeting?
You don't understand the word meeting, Mr. Young?
There's 2 interpretations of the word meeting, sir. One is a casual meeting where you meet somebody on a sidewalk or in a public place, and another is a business meeting in a formal business environment.
Well, under either interpretation, when was your first meeting with Mr. Anthony?
The end of January or beginning of February of 1984
Where was that meeting?
at Neptune Palace, I believe. The name is Neptune Palace, a restaurant at the end of Pier 39.
Okay, thank you. And at that meeting, how long did it last?
Under a half hour.
How much under a half hour?
I don't recall.
Were you ever seated during the course of that meeting?
No, sir, never.
Did the meeting take place in a dining room at this restaurant?
Yes, it did.
And there was yourself, Mr. Quartermain, Mr. Anthony, another male, another female, and possibly 1 or 2 children at that meeting. Is that so?
No, that's not correct.
Correct me then, please.
There was myself, Mr. Quartermain, Mr. Anthony. There were 2 females, another male, and 1 or more children.
Fine. And of the 2 females, was it a lady by the name of Diane? Is that so?
Yes.
And during this meeting at Neptune's restaurant, Mr. Anthony told you what he did for a living. Is that so?
No.
Did Mr. Anthony disclose how he earned his living in any respect during that meeting?
Yes.
How was that done?
He said that he was in the gold business.
I see. And you did interpret that to mean that that's what he did for a living. Is that so?
He might have had sources of living also.
The question is, did you interpret that as Mr. Anthony meaning to tell you what he did for a living?
Objection. Relevance.
No, overruled.
I don't recall what I interpreted him to say other than it was the business he was in.
And what did he tell you about the gold business at this meeting?
Nothing else other than he was in the gold business.
Did you ask him any questions about the gold business?
I don't recall.
So, when you left that meeting, you didn't know whether Mr. Anthony was buying gold for a living, is that right?
I did not know.
You didn't know whether he was selling gold for a living, is that right?
I knew he told me he was in the gold business. He could have been doing all of that. All right, that was 5. Could you hear it now? So another way, this is called, it's marked in 50s. And if it, this is for 25s. So somewhere in the middle it's where. Yeah. All right. Want to do a little push? Do a little 170? Yeah. So everybody talks these next couple of pages, right?
Okay.
Let's go just to, well, let's do the last question on 127. Is that where we were?
126 we ended.
126. All right, how about we do 127 and 128?
Okay.
All right, we're going faster.
Can you see me in there? It's just 101. All right.
All right, here's 170 for a little bit. We'll start on line one on page 127.
Okay, I will start.
All right.
Right, you didn't know whether he was manufacturing gold products, did you?
He didn't say that.
You didn't know what aspect of the gold business Mr. Anthony was in all, did you, when you left the meeting?
No, I did not.
During that meeting, did Mr. Anthony tell you where he lived?
Well, I don't know if it was that meeting or subsequent meetings.
I'm talking about that meeting.
I don't recall.
Thank you. At that meeting, did Mr. Anthony tell you of his marital status?
No, I don't believe so.
At that meeting, did Mr. Anthony tell you anything about his background whatsoever, other than he was in the gold business?
I don't recall.
Can you tell us anything that Mr. Anthony said to you other than that he was in the gold business?
I don't recall.
My question was, can you tell us whether Mr. Anthony told you anything else other than that he was in the gold business?
Objection. Asked and answered. He says he doesn't recall.
Goes to 127.
We gypped her out of a page.
Where is it? Sustained. Ask another question.
During that meeting, there was certainly no conversation about killing anybody, was there?
That's correct.
The next meeting with Mr. Anthony that you told us about was at the Anchorage, is that right?
No, sir, that's not right.
When was your next meeting with Mr. Anthony?
Sometime in February.
When in February?
I don't recall exactly.
Do you have any records that would allow you to refresh your recollection?
I don't know if my records will reflect that meeting. They might.
You kept a personal diary, did you not?
I kept a calendar. Yes.
Or a calendar? Rather, yes.
Yes, a calendar.
And what did you usually keep in that calendar?
Some records of where I went. Oh, Victoria, let's make sure we get you some pages. All right, how'd you do on 170? Did you like that little break in there? All right, let's try that again at 160. The same thing, and you can just see mine.
Okay, I was looking for them. Looking over here.
All right, so we'll go back to page 127 at the top, and we're back to 160. Ready?
Right. You didn't know whether he was manufacturing gold products, did you?
He didn't say that.
You didn't know what aspect of the gold business Mr. Anthony was in at all, did you, when you left that meeting?
No, I did not.
During that meeting, did Mr. Anthony tell you where he lived?
Well, I don't know if it was that meeting or subsequent meetings.
I'm talking about that meeting.
I don't recall.
Thank you. At that meeting, did Mr. Anthony tell you of his marital status?
No, I don't believe so.
At that meeting, did Mr. Anthony tell you anything about his background whatsoever, other than that he was in the gold business?
I don't recall.
Can you tell us anything that Mr. Anthony said to you other than that he was in the gold business?
I don't recall.
My question was, can you tell us whether Mr. Anthony told you anything else other than that he was in the gold business?
Objection. Asked and answered. He says he doesn't recall.
Sustained. Ask another question.
During that meeting, there was certainly no conversation about killing anybody, was there?
That's correct.
The next meeting with Mr. Anthony that you told us about was at the Anchorage, is that right?
No, sir, that's not right.
When was your next meeting with Mr. Anthony?
Sometime in February.
When in February?
I don't recall exactly.
Do you have any records that would allow you to refresh your recollection?
I don't know if my records will reflect that meeting. They might.
You kept a personal diary, did you not?
I kept a calendar, yes.
Or a calendar, rather, yes.
Yes, a calendar.
And what did you usually keep in that calendar?
Some records of where I went. All right, so let's put... I can just do light work here so you can go take them.
Because you need these, right? What test do you need? This one? Yeah, no. Let's just do that. That's not fair. Okay. I thought she was coming, no?
She has, but you know, I thought her call was private, and then she left a message.
Okay.
So maybe it was her. Wanna
So
find
let's
out?
just do that. All right.
I'll use one.
I'll just use this one. I'll just use this one. Okay. All right. So did you turn off?
Good job.